So the next step then, step 9, let's start creating some tests. So as you'll see, I've already started to build this out. I've created a few more functions and filled out the functions for the orders page. So we've got enter the address info, payment info, edit the product info, navigate to the page, and actually a simple step to click on the process button. So if we look at that, that all maps neatly to the product information entry, address information, payment information, and the process, and clicking on the orders navigation menu item. What I've also done is I've filled these out. As you'll see that I have created parameters so that when we edit the address information, for example, we have parameters for each of the address values, and those are then used as part of the values, so they're not hard-coded. And I've done that for the product information as well. Okay, so for the products, we've got product, quantity, price, and discount. So next we need to start building out the tests. We have the functions to interact with the page, and we need to use those functions to run and execute our tests. And we're going to build the tests out by creating subfolders again, and each subfolder under here will represent a feature that we want to test. So maybe we want to test the login functionality, and maybe we want to test the orders functionality, and then maybe we want to have another feature folder for viewing products and viewing orders. Okay, so we create those by, so you get the idea. Now for the tests themselves then, I've got my orders. I want to create new orders. This will be my order creation tests, and I add new test items in here. So I might create a create valid order test, and then I might create under there also create an invalid order. So under here we'll have new item, create invalid order. All right, so this is one that we don't enter the right data for, and it should not create the order. So 2 tests in my orders folder. And if I want to create the valid order, then I don't need to record the test anymore. I'm going to use the features from the orders page. So I want to navigate to the page, the orders page. I want to enter the product information. I want to enter the address information, and I want to enter the payment information. And then I want to process the order. So that's the test steps. The only thing that's missing now is the expected results. So we'll add a checkpoint in a minute once we've run through those. Now also, because we've parameterized each of these keyword functions that we've created, I might navigate to that page, and then I want to enter the product info. You'll see that we can click on the value here, and we can enter some parameters. So the defaults are already set to family album. Maybe I change the quantity to 200, the price to 10, keep the discount maybe at 5%. And then my address information, maybe I don't want to use the default address information. So I could come in here and I can change this for this particular test case. So customer 2, and it's the same address. And then the payment information and the process order. So now to execute the test, we can click on run create valid order, and it will execute each of those keyword functions by calling them individually, and it will complete the product information, clicking on calculate. Then it will complete the address information, the payment information, and finally click on the process button. So the only piece we have left in that test case to complete is the checkpoint. So if we go back to our create valid order test, at the end of this, after we've run the test steps, we want to confirm that the expected results match the actual results. Now you'll notice that when we've processed the order, if it was processed correctly, we get the new order has been successfully added. text. So all we want to do is add on here checkpoints, and we want a property checkpoint, and we'll drag that to the object, and we confirm that the text property of that object is set to new order has been successfully added. So that's the object on our web page, and TestComplete's come up with the content text, new order has been successfully added, finish on that, and that is our create valid order completed. And it'd be very similar now to build out the create invalid order. We just drag the navigate to page, add the product info, add the address info, add the payment info, and then process order. But in this instance, because it's an invalid order, we might want to set the parameters for this particular test slightly different. We may want to put an invalid product in here, or maybe a negative price, etc. And then the property checkpoint would look to check that there was an error when we tried to process that order. But you can see, because we've built out these reusable functions for the page, you can see how easy it is to start building out these test cases for our orders feature just by dragging and dropping features and functionality keyword tests from the orders page. So the next step then in the whole process, step 10, we need to start adding those tests to the execution plan. So in TestComplete, we now have our orders tests, and we can open up the execution plan, which we've already got the start, edge, navigate and stop. So what we want to do is maybe add a folder for our orders tests, and move stop edge down one, and then we can drag on our test cases that we've created, our create valid order and our create invalid order, if we finish that one off. All right, so create valid order and create invalid order. And if we want to create permutations on those, because we've parameterized the tests and the functions for the pages, we can just feed in different data sets as part of that. And what you may want to do to create another layer of parameterization is on the tests themselves, where we feed in these parameters here. So we've got all of the order information, product information, address. You may set up some more parameters on here so that you can then data drive this whole test case and enter the data then on the execution plan. But at the moment, we've got a valid order, invalid order, we dragged it onto the execution plan. And we can run that whole project and all of the test items in it by clicking on the play button. That'll run the start edge, navigate to the application, run the valid, invalid, and then stop edge. Next then, step 11, we start the build out. We need to add keyword functions, we need to add tests, and we need to add to that execution plan. So in this example, let's look at building out the view all orders. So in here, we'll need to add keyword functions that will deal with all of the functionality on this view all orders page. So perhaps selecting an order to edit, checking all the orders, unchecking the orders, and navigating to the view all orders page itself. So we'll start that with making sure we have the view all orders folder for our orders, view all orders page, and then in here we can start to add new keyword tests. So in this instance, we'll do a view all orders page nav 2, and that'll simply be our navigation function, and we can record that with a simple record test steps. And once the recording bar is running, click on the view all orders navigation menu item, click stop, complete the recording, tidy up the recording, and that's that keyword function implemented. So we'll delete then navigate to, because all we're interested in is the clicking on the view all orders menu item. So we clean up everything else by deleting the browse or window, the browser resize as well, and that is our view all orders navigation function. Next we want to record and add another keyword function, so we'll add new item, and in this instance we'll view all orders select order. Click on OK. As we record this, all we're interested in doing is selecting one order. So in this instance we want to select one order and record that process. And in the example project that we provide, if you click on the link on the left hand side, we can send you a sample completed project. We show you how to actually parameterize this, so you select an order based on, say, the name or the product that they've selected. But in this instance we're just going to build things out, sketch things out. So that's the select order, get rid of the navigate, get rid of the position. So we just clicked on example order. We would, like I say, we would want to parameterize that, so you can select a particular order, but I just want to build out all the different keyword tests initially. Another new item, we'll do view all orders page select all, and no prizes for guessing what we're doing here. When we record this one is we click on the check all button. Then we clean up that recording. And what we're looking to do is implement keyword functions, as I call them, for every piece of functionality on that page, so we can reuse it in all of our tests again. All right, so just quickly, one or two more. We'll just add the deselect all, and then we're going to view all orders page deselect all. And as we record that, we just click on the deselect button, and then one more piece of functionality of that page will be the keyword function to modify an order. So new item, and the view all orders page modify order. Okay, click on OK. Record the test steps, and in this instance we just want to click on the modify order button for one particular order, and in this case what I might actually do is add a checkpoint to make sure that I'm on the edit orders page. So text or property checkpoint. I'll drag the crosshair over the edit order object just to make sure we're on the right page. Click on next, and then the property we want to check is the content text is edit order, so we'll finish that. Right, and it's good practice to add some checkpoints on most of those keyword functions, just so that you confirm that the function has completed properly before you move on to the next step. Again, we clear this up, so we don't want the navigate bit. We don't need the position bit. We just need to click on the object that does the edit order or modify order operation, and then we've got the checkpoint. So now that I've built out a few more keyword functions for that particular page, I can build out the view all orders tests. So I've got the view orders folder there, so that's the sort of feature that I want to test, and now in here I can start to add test case. So I might want to add a test case for view all orders select all. I want to add a test case for deselecting all. You get the idea. You just want to build out all of the tests now, and then we can build those up with the keyword functions we've already written. So view all orders deselect. Okay. So in this particular example, view all orders select. So to run that test case, all we want to do is drag in some of these functions. So nav to the view all orders page, and then on the view all orders page, we want to do the select all function, and then we want to run a checkpoint to make sure that we've selected all. So if I simulate this process, so that's all of those selected, maybe a really simple checkpoint just for this example is property checkpoint, and we just make sure that the first checkpoint is checked in this particular example. Obviously, if we're building this for real, I want to check that all of them are checked, but in this example, we'll just quickly do value that checkbox is checked, and finish that. Okay. Then I do the same for the deselect all, make sure that I deselected all of them and the value for that property point was deselected. So another piece of functionality or a feature that I may want to test is the modify orders. So under my tests, I might add another folder which would cover the modify orders functional area, and in here I'd create some new keyword tests to cover those test scenarios. So modify order test, and in this example, again for a modify order, I'm going to need to carry out a number of steps. First off, I need to go to the view all orders page, so nav to that page. And then I need to select a record to edit. So I'm going to record to the end of this. So I'm going to add to the end of this test after we've navigated to this page, and I'm going to simulate selecting on that particular icon to modify the order. Now here, because this page, the web orders page, the edit order page, is broken down into a number of different functions, so product information, address information, payment information. What I probably want to do is then record separate keyword functions on the edit order page. So I'm just going to stop recording that test. And our test is going to be made up of the navigation to the all orders page, get rid of that one, get rid of the position, and then clicking on the modify order icon. And from here on in, I probably want to build this up by creating another page object, so a new folder for modify orders. And then in there, I'd add the functions for modifying product information, modifying the address information, and modifying the payment information, clicking on the update button. Okay, so that's what I then build out for the modify orders page. And as I build those out, those keyword functions in the pages folder, and as I build out the tests in the tests folder, of course the last step then is to update the execution plan with these new tests, where I'd potentially add a new folder, again for functional area, so view all orders scenarios, and in here I'd want to drag in the view all orders tests that I want to execute. So I might have my view all orders select test case and my view all orders deselect test case. And that's all I need to do when it comes to start building out all of the automated tests for this particular project. So I need to go through all of the pages, implement the keyword functions for each page, for each of the functions on those pages, just as I was starting to do for the modify orders page. And then I can build out the tests reusing those functions in the folders for each of the features I want to test, and then all of the scenarios that I build out, or the test cases I build out that are constructed from those functions I've built. But possibly two things you've noticed as we've gone through here is, one, I'd be building out product information, address and payment information, which is repeating one of the functions or three of the functions that we've created on the orders page, because these are the same product information, address and payment informations. So I'd want to refactor this potentially to reuse these functions for product information, address and payment. And I'm going to show you that in the next video, how we can pull out some of the common functions into the components area. And the second thing is that you'll see I'm repeating a lot of the navigation in the different areas of the page object functions that I'm creating. So I've got a navigate function in here, I've got a navigate function in here, I've got a navigate function in all of these folders that I'm going to start building out. And that is, again, code that we want to look at refactoring so that we have one common function for navigation, and we'll pull that out as a component, a navigation component, in the next video too. Our final step then in this series of videos on building out a keyword framework with TestComplete, we come down to refactoring, where we have common code that is reused across multiple tests, or common code that's reused on multiple functions that we've written. We want to pull that out and reuse it so we don't duplicate code. And we're going to go through two examples. One, pulling out some functionality for entering address details, whether you're creating a new record or modifying an existing one. And the second one is to deal with the navigation across the different pages. So in terms of our web orders application, then we'll see that when we make an order or place an order, we have these product information functions, address information, payment information, and that functionality is duplicated when we do the edit order as well. So there's no point in writing this function multiple times for these pages. We want to pull this functionality out into common code or a common function that can be reused on the edit order page and used on the new order page. And obviously the second bit that we want to refactor then is this navigation menu. We don't want to have the same repeated code for clicking on these menu items, because that will be duplicated code again, and we can pull that out into one single navigation function which will be reusable and we can extend far easier when we add other menu items. So in TestComplete then, the first thing we want to do, we can see that we've created in our orders page, we've got a page to enter the address information, the payment and the product info. So that's the product info, the address and the payment. And we've got that same code starting to appear on our modify orders page. So what we'll do is pull out, and I'm just going to use the address info as this example, is pull out and place this address info function into our component. So we will have an address entry component. So under here I might add a new item called component address info. And initially what I'd like to do is probably just copy all of the steps from here. So we can highlight all of those and copy them, and then we can paste them in to our component that we've just created. And I'd probably want to add those same parameters in here, so we would have parameters for each of those. City, state and zip. Then we might have some default values in there, but for now we'll just add those parameters on here. So rather than having a hard-coded value, we make sure we are using the test parameter, cast name from this, and that has got the street parameter. Okay, so I think that's looking good. Let's pick those up. And then we can reuse this function on multiple pages. And critical to enabling this, because this is available on this URL and it's also seen on a completely different URL, that address information functionality, we need to make sure that this is wildcarded so that the find element operation for customer name or for street or for city will work on the different pages. So we can do show object in name mapping editor, and we just want to double check that this is wildcarded, this page object is wildcarded to work on those pages. So it will work on samples, so as long as it's got samples and then that bit's wildcarded, as long as it works on samples and that bit's wildcarded, then those find element operations using the XPath and the label will work on any page. So now all we need to do is reuse that component within our tests. And what we have in our existing setup is we've got this create valid order. So if we come in here, rather than use the address function here, we want to use the address function from our component. So we drag that in, and then possibly what I'd do is I would disable that operation. So now we're using the component address information, and that function can also be used on any tests where we do a modify order as well. So that's creating a new order. If I'm doing a modify order, I can now come in here and I can reuse that component for updating the address information. So we've got one address information component that we've written for this object or feature that's reused across multiple pages, and we can reuse that now as a component in our tests. So the second area then where refactoring might come into play then is that I've noticed as I've been working on all of my page objects, so my home page, my orders page, modify orders, all of these pages, that I seem to have this common function nav to, or navigate to a particular page. And all these functions are doing is clicking on a menu item on the main menu. So they're a piece of repetitive code to click on these different main menu items. So I might want to pull that out and refactor it. And one clever and slightly advanced way to approach this in TestComplete is again to create another component. So I'll create a new item on here, and I might call this my main menu nav. And then in my project, I want to create a project level variable. Okay, and this variable I will call main menu item, and it'll be a string, variable of string type, and maybe my default value would be order. Let's check that. So I might want default to clicking on the order button. We're going to use this variable in the name map in a minute to make the name map entry dynamic. So when we look at our nav2 function here, you'll see we've got the web page orders, and if we highlight that in the name map, we've got the web page orders. So we need to add a menu, another child object to this page object that we've defined here. So I'm going to add an object, and map that object. I'm going to use the crosshair to highlight the order menu item object, and then click on OK. And you'll see that TestComplete has added a child object to the name map, and that's called link order. And I'm going to drag that up because we don't need any of these other objects. I'll get rid of those child objects. Yes to all. So we've just got link order. And what we want to look for at the moment is the menu item that's got the word order in it. So I should be able to right click on this now and do highlight on screen. And it will always highlight the order option. But what we want to be able to do is use the variable that we defined. So you can use a neat little trick to update this value. So instead of being hard coded, it will use the value that we've just defined in our project variables called main menu item. Okay. So instead of order, what I want to specify in here is % main menu item, which is our project level variable, and then %. And you need to make sure that it is contained within these single quotes as well. But once we've defined that, this will use the value, the string value that's defined at the project variables level. So if we just save that project, so I should be able to right click on this now and highlight on screen, and it will again pick up the order value. But what we'll see is if we use different text in the variable, so view all products for example, if I come back here, change that to view all products, and change that to view all products to products. Okay, and then we go back to our name map. This single entry in the name map can now be dynamically changed because we've changed the project level variable. You will need to refresh this name map first, and we're going to do this in code in a minute, but you can manually refresh the name map there, right click on link orders and highlight on screen. So now all we need to do is utilize that capability in our main menu navigation test case. And we can do that with 3 or 4 lines of test items in our keyword test. And we set out with that with creating a parameter. So we want to parameterize this test case, and we'll just use a parameter menu item. We'll have default value again, orders. And then in the test steps, we want to take whatever that parameter is at runtime and use that parameter to update our project variable. So we can do statements, set variable value, and we want to set our project level variable, main menu item, with the value from that parameter. Okay, so not a constant, we want a test parameter, and this enables us to configure this at runtime from our tests when we call this keyword test. Now we want to run a little bit of code snippet. So this is pretty critical because this updates the name map at runtime. So we need run code snippet. In this instance, we just need the alias browser. So the top level object, and then we can use this function called refresh mapping info, and this will update dynamically the name map at runtime. Okay, so the final step we then need in here is to actually click on that menu item. So we just need an on-screen action. And the object we want to interact with is our link, as defined in the name map, and we just need the click operation. Okay, so this is saying to click on this link order object that resides under the page object, and that link order object we've defined in our name map, and we've made it dynamic by specifying that it can be set with the variable at the project level. And at runtime, we will set that variable at the project level when we call this keyword test with a particular parameter, which will be the menu item name. Okay. So if I go to run this function now, it's running with the parameter orders. So if I run this, it will run and prompt me to run with the default value orders. Click OK, and it clicks on the orders option. If I change that to view all products as the default value, then it would click on the view all products. But what I actually want to do at this stage is update my test so that rather than using the hard-coded nav2 functions in all of these pages that I've created functions for, I want to use this reusable function that I've created. So you'll see in this test I've got orders page navigate to. So I want to replace that now with main menu nav. I can disable that operation, and the parameter I want to feed in is orders, so it's taken the default value. And then again on one of the other ones we've got here view all orders, select all test. Again, I need to navigate to that page. So rather than use the view all orders navigation function, I can now use this main menu navigation function. But obviously here, because this is the view all orders test case, I want to be on the view all orders page, which means I need to click on the view all orders menu item. So view all orders there, view all orders. So now when we run this, once I've disabled that nav2 function that is now obsolete, and if I run this test case, should click on the view all orders and navigate to the view all orders page before doing the check all operation. So that's two examples of refactoring, and your refactoring will be different for your projects, but you just have to be aware of building out these keyword functions for your pages and looking for repetitive operations or repetitive pieces of code. And if you find that repetitive piece of code, for example this nav2 function that seemed to be cropping up in all of these page objects, you want to try and pull that out and add it to a component so that you can reuse that code and configure that component so that it's parameterized and reusable in different situations and different test cases. Now all of that is documented in our handy step-by-step PDF document, which will walk you through refactoring that navigation example and takes you through right from the start building this keyword framework project for this web orders application. And we'll walk you through all of the steps to build out that framework, and you can then take what you've learned and apply it to your own applications.